Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, technology, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Andrew Roth. He is the founder and CEO of DCDX, a global research and strategy firm helping brands understand and engage with Gen Z. Andrew has pioneered new ways for brands such as Chipotle, Crocs, L'Oreal to build authentic relationships with young audiences. And he's recently launched something new called Offline that we'll talk about a little bit more. But Andrew is leading the charge in bridging the digital and physical world for talent and brands alike. And I think he's one of the cooler marketers in this space. He's focused pretty much on Gen Z, but probably more than that as well. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Adam. Excited to be here.
And Andrew, just for our listeners, why don't we just start and you tell us about DCDX as well as Offline and everything that you're up to, and then we can get into a conversation about the actual details.
Yeah, certainly. So I about 5-ish years ago, I was wrapping up my junior year of college at a bad time, which was March of 2020, and ended up kind of just I had been doing some web design in the past, just kind of a side hustle, and realized at the time that I really wanted to focus in on helping brands understand Gen Z, this kind of new and emerging audience. Obviously, I'm a part of that. I'm on the upper end there, and I saw a really big opportunity to help bridge a gap through research. Right, the way research was done, these 60 question surveys being sent to 16-year-olds in their email wasn't so effective for me. I know in my classes wasn't ever responding well to those, and I knew from my peers was the same. And so we kind of asked this question to start off of how do we really design research to resonate with how young people are communicating and behaving? And I think as we explored and grew into that mission and approach, we were able to do some really awesome work with brands like Chipotle and L'Oreal and Crocs, like you've mentioned. And through that, we've also been studying Gen Z's relationship with brands and technology as well. And a key part of that has been our studies on Gen Z and screen time and then Gen Z and digital well-being. We've put out research on annual screen time reports. We have a series of reporting we do called From Digital Natives to Digital Captives, How the Internet Changed Gen Z. So a lot of different ways we approach that. And I say all that to say that our mission from the start has been, what we say is to make the future human, to give our generation and the next a better and more human life. And which leads us to some work we did recently with Eventbrite, studying kind of the rise of these new types of communities and community leaders that are out there, the run clubs, the dinner parties, the game nights, the all these different IRL gatherings and kind of put this post-COVID world. And so we did some research with Eventbrite that led us to spin out a new agency or a new company called Offline from our agency, DCDX. And Offline is a platform helping brands discover and connect with in-person communities to help build a new economy around connection. So that's kind of the high level view. Hopefully that gives a good level set on where we are today.
Yeah, and I think it's a great it's a great niche you have for an agency and a research firm, because I think it's not a new phenomenon, right? That marketers and people in the business world just do a bad job connecting with the youth. It's something that's sort of inevitable that happens with every generation. And so, like, what a great opportunity for you to come along and do things like research a better way. It's interesting because I have one of my close friends in Austin is a Gen Zer. He's a YouTuber, and we always talk all the time about how he even brings this up to me, how much advertisers just don't get Gen Z. And I'm like, I'm not going to apologize for advertisers doing cringy things. I think a lot of the things are cringy as well. But can you share some of, I guess, if you knew nothing else and you took nothing else away from today's podcast, like, what are marketers in just the business world getting so wrong that Gen Z either finds cringe? Is it timeless things like talking down to them? Is it specific things like not using the right language? Any way you want to take that question?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when most people talk about Gen Z, it's a very what I would call like a media-centric version of Gen Z, right? You hear all these stories about quiet quitting and Gen Z in the workplace and all the trends that pop up every single day. And I think for for a generation that spans, 14, 15 years old to 20, 27, 28, there are so many different versions of Gen Z within that. And I think what we often say is the loudest voices on Gen Z are what tend to be heard the most. But so often those are not the most the most recurring voices, right? The vast majority of Gen Zers are not the creators, but the scrollers and the people watching that content. And I think we often just think about Gen Z as the TikTok generation or the generation that's up there, making this content. But we so often forget to listen and to lean into the people that are really actually controlling where that goes, which are the people that are consuming it. And so I think that's how we focus on Gen Z, is just keeping in mind this nuance that there are so many different sides to this generation, to many generations, but particularly to this generation that has been brought up alongside the most rapid evolution of technology that we've ever seen.
Totally. And one thing that I've seen marketers kind of get wrong for, I guess, you mentioned influential people. For influencer marketing overall across cohorts, is like marketers choose like strange people, like the sort of the Instagram influencer where it's like just someone who's clearly engagement farmed by sharing kind of, risque things to build up an audience. And they're not really taken seriously. They're even a bit of a joke. And, they might have a high follower count, but sure, anyone can spam or use, bots to be able to inflate that. And I feel like marketers have done a poor job, not just with Gen Z, but kind of across the spectrum of like who is really influential. And it's not always the people who you might think. I think it's always been more around expertise, right? Like if you follow someone just because they're like the best person on X, Y, or Z, like that person has so much more influence on what you'd actually make a purchase on than some random, political account or random travel influencer that you wouldn't really trust. And I feel like the marketers that get it really get it. And then it seems like a lot of brands just throw dollars at kind of the same people, and it's kind of unimpressive, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's as the creator rose to fame, right, there became this fear of missing out on the audience and kind of this new distribution channel that allowed marketers to get in front of the eyeballs of so many young people that were like kind of curated around niches, right? I mean, that's what the power of creators are, is they're focused on these certain types of content and niche. And so the people that follow that are attuned into that. And so I think it became this kind of to your point, like this shiny diamond, and everyone started chasing the same ones. But I think as everyone started chasing the same things, just as they do with trends and just as they do with all these other kind of shiny cultural moments, they end up all blending together, right? And so when everyone's working with the same creator, like what value does that creator have, number one, and number two, what value do those brands have independently, right? And they all kind of just, we say, blend together into a sea of sameness. They kind of become this soup that just is bland and meaningless.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a holdover from the TV industrial complex that it has to be a few people versus, the internet kind of breaks that apart, and it's kind of, this more bottom up phenomenon, and people can emerge and they don't have to be a Paris Hilton type. Anyway, so you've built a massive network of Gen Z participants for research. And I'm curious, how do you find and motivate, I think that's probably the important part, young people to participate in your studies?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things there. One is we intentionally do not recruit people for a panel. And I think that's really important because panels are a very self-selecting group. And I don't have any friends and don't know anyone that has joined a panel and tells me all about it. And I worry for the people for the marketers that are basing their insights off of those things, because that's just not the average person, right? So what we're doing is taking a very different approach to say, how do Gen Zers connect and connect with one another on social media, right? And so we're tapping into these peer groups through social networks where we're working with our ambassadors, what we call partners, and they're sending things out to their friends. So no one in our network is signed up to a panel. We have a group of ambassadors that has kind of represents us throughout their communities, and we send them opportunities that they send out to their peers. And so everything is very peer driven, right? It's coming from trusted sources. It's coming from people and friends versus random emails that come in your spam inbox. And so that's how we build this, and I think that's a really important differentiator that's not just making our work meaningful, but it's also making the insights coming out of it meaningful, because these are people that are truly just like the average Gen Z, or that are not doing anything that's making them biased or lumped into another bucket.
So that's really interesting. That I like the notion of referrals, because for something like this, I think you'd give a more honest answer, or want to connect more if it was actually from someone you know saying, "Do you want to participate in this?"
Right.
I think that's how that's one of the strategies Nikita Beer used to build like multiple successful social apps. I don't know if you know Nikita.
Oh yeah, the gas app and TBH and all those other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the bases of his approach was, I think they're also a little black hat, but I know that they like went into to schools and basically got people to promote this directly to their peers, like in person. And yeah.
Yeah, I have thoughts on Nikita and his approach to building apps for teenagers, but I'll leave those for the after show.
Yeah, sure. It's totally fine. So you recently launched Offline to help brands connect with real world micro communities and events. Um, is this something that kind of came to be just looking at the world post COVID and there being a thirst for people to want to go out and connect? Because I feel like this is such a great idea right now. And not just young people, but even millennials. I feel a lot of them need to be more social. Like a lot of them had, maybe they're just their patterns of going out sort of disrupted by the pandemic. And I think some of them came back, and then some of them are, still a little bit more introverted, and maybe we're at the end of that trend, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I mentioned some research we did with Eventbrite, and it was the focus of that was like we were seeing the rise of these different types of communities. Again, run clubs, dinner parties, game nights, all the ways that people are gathering. There's an awesome organization in Los Angeles that's a feminist birding club, which is just like the perfect description of what this new era of communities is, because it's such a niche interest, and yet it's actually pretty massive and growing very quickly. And so all these different types of communities out there, and we saw that the way people were gathering was changing. Right, this idea of like we used to gather in places, the third space, right, the bar, the gym, the coffee shop, but that's changed in the last 2 years, and that change is a shift from where we're gathering to why. It's taking these interests that were born during COVID, and using those interests as the foundation for why people are gathering. And it doesn't matter then where you gather, right? The run club is about running. It doesn't matter if you run from A to B, from B to A, or from C to Y, right? Like there's so many different ways that happens, and it's the same for all these different types of interests. And so this shift in where to why, I think, has unlocked a lot of different reasons people are coming together, right? Like it's not specific to young people. It's all ages. One of the most popular community groups out there is actually moms groups that are moms who walk, or like there's so many of these that are out there, because everyone has that craving in this post-COVID world. I think we often say that their original promise for social media was connection. It's going to make us more connected, but really it's been a empty promise of connectivity and not connection. And those two things are very different. And so people are seeking that true feeling of connection that is only found in person. And it's just manifesting right now in a very unique way, which are these fourth spaces, these gatherings focused on common interests rather than common locations. And so that's, I think, this fundamental shift that we saw, that we wanted to open up as an opportunity, because we saw all these communities that are doing this without ways to monetize beyond kind of the traditional ticketing. And so we looked at this and said, how do we help brands find and discover them? Because this is such a raw and open opportunity for getting your brand in the right audience.
Oh, so if I'm a brand, I can sponsor a given event through your product.
Right. I mean, we're helping you discover the right ones. There are thousands and thousands out there. Same as right 10 years ago with the creators and influencers. There were so many out there, and finding the right one is so important, as we talked about earlier. So we're helping you find the right ones, and then we're helping you make those partnerships happen.
That's very cool. Yeah. So do you want to share just one story from your consultancy on a brand campaign that you really liked, and sort of, what went into it and some of the results that they saw, for someone who's maybe thinking about engaging you for a Gen Z initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to. There's one we did with offline that was pretty recent that I'll talk about. We were working with a fragrance brand called Le Monde Gourmand. They're a pretty hot, like TikTok-y Urban Outfitters type brand for a lot of young women, and they were launching a new fragrance called Copal de Terre. It's a Mexican fragrance co-created with a Mexican artist, kind of inspired by the scents of Mexico. So very, very had a very specific audience it wanted to reach. And we went and found some communities in Los Angeles, which was kind of the area they wanted to focus on for this, that really, really represented the people that they wanted to reach with this and the vibe that they also wanted to kind of resonate with. And we ended up working with two incredible communities in Los Angeles, Earthy Corazon, which was a kind of a mystical, like spiritual type vibe that they brought people together for kind of tarot readings, card games, things like that, again, we're playing in this like kind of niche, astrological type vibe. And so for this event, Earthy created an event where she brought everyone in her community together around this fragrance. Her mom made pozole, which is a Mexican dish. They played Loteria, which is a Mexican card game. She built an altar around this fragrance, and it was like an incredibly unique and raw experience that was designed around the fragrance. And on the other end, we had a community we worked with called Persona the Shop, and they had about 1,000 people come to their market. It was kind of this open market event, but it was a very nostalgic themed event called Para Mi Niña, so all for like their inner child. And so they had a tattoo bar, they had a hair braiding, they had a flower kind of bouquet bar as well, and the fragrance was like intertwined into each piece of that. And so both of those things were really unique experiences that were created with this fragrance in mind, and ended up not only creating some really meaningful impressions out of that, both at the event, in-person engagement with the brand, but on social, kind of the waves on social afterwards were pretty substantial, with over 500,000 people kind of seeing or viewing that content just from those two communities alone. Tons of user-generated content, and I think most meaningfully, right, like even just from two communities, we had people coming to us saying, "Hey, like, what was that fragrance brand that knew so many cool things about Los Angeles? Like, they were just in with the communities there. They knew the scene so well. Like, who are they?" And because it was kind of, again, launching and wanted to establish a little bit more of a name there. And so just so cool to see that in-person impact. And that's the true word of mouth that comes from immersing and integrating into communities like that.
Yeah, this seems like a great opportunity for a brand to do something like a branded food truck or branded coffee truck at the event. And they could, of course, do that through AdQuick. There's definitely some synergies with doing some out-of-home advertising at the actual influencer events.
Yeah, 100%. I think showing up, there's so many ways that in-person is undervalued right now. And I think out-of-home is one of those, as young people have a premium on in-person connection.
Yeah. So Andrew, I'm curious, what industries do you think should be considering doing more specifically with Gen Z that you think maybe are ignoring the young cohort? And I ask that because when I was a young millennial, I felt many industries kind of didn't talk to us very well, financial, healthcare, a bunch of others. But I'm curious what you think from an industry perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting because I think I obviously did not grow up as a millennial, but I think what feels particularly unique about Gen Z is just the pure amount of advertisers and marketers that have focused on this generation as a core part of their demographic. And so it kind of feels like which companies like have not moved to this generation many times like are the ones that come to mind for this, rather than the ones that are just missing an opportunity, because I think it's been so popularized that any decision not to probably seems more strategic than not. But I think there are a couple. I mean, I do think like at the highest level of like industry, like politics is one that just has not understood the impact that a young person can have. And I think we saw that most recently with the New York mayor election or process as it's starting to unfold. But there's so much, it's so behind and how young people want to engage in that space. So I think, again, not exactly the answer I think you might have been looking for that, but it's like the one that feels like it's just not just a year behind, but 100, right? And so
Yeah. Well, I think that one may be evergreen because politicians don't think young people vote. And
right.
like, what an opportunity to say, well, that doesn't have to be true. Let's engage them in the process. So I think that's a great example, actually.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I'm sure there's, I mean, I know like there are industries that where young people are starting to move into these spaces, you know, home rentals and automotive, like there's these things are kind of starting to become more in line with a young person's interests, but some of those are more just age related versus like kind of things that are just categorically not understanding what's happening.
Yeah, I mentioned financial. I feel like Robinhood is the first finance company to just do an awesome job, like fully marketing to millennials and Gen Z too. There's a lot of Gen Z traders, but like before Robinhood, I like every E-Trade ad felt like it was for like, 50 somethings, right? It was just never they never really cracked it. And like Robinhood had like these, cyberpunk crypto ads, and it wasn't just like kind of boomer humor, on during the Super Bowl. Like their marketing was actually very good.
Yeah. No, they've done a great job. I mean, I think they got me hooked on it. So I think to your point, it's taking that, like even their name, right? It's just taking a different approach and kind of that challenger mindset to categories that haven't been disrupted with that in the past.
100%. So I'm curious, other than the brands you work with now, what brands do you think do just a great job with marketing in the modern world to any cohort? Like what brands do you look to and you're like, wow, they really get it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's funny because I think when people ask like which brands are like doing the best job of marketing to Gen Z, I think the ones that stand out are always the ones that are like most on trend and kind of doing the most popular things. Like Duolingo is, I think, a very popular answer in many cases for like a brand that's done really well with Gen Z, with the mascot and how they kind of have basically like transformed a new era of marketing for a young audience and just being a little bit unhinged in the way they were. But actually I don't usually use that as an answer because I think while that's done a great job in capitalizing on like a moment and kind of a new way of communicating, I look at the brands that have like just been building a legacy around their positioning for a long time. Like I think Airbnb is just an iconic brand and always has been for how they approach and position themselves. That isn't clearly like, it's not, you don't look at Airbnb and you're like, that's a Gen Z brand or that's a millennial brand. I think you look at it and you're like, that's a brand that speaks to me. And I think that idea is so powerful and not many brands do that well. I think Spotify is kind of towing that line and has has been close to doing that really, really well in cases. But yeah, I mean, it's those iconic kind of like forever brands, I would call them, that are really changing, I think, the way marketing can be done for all generations and showing a good example that you don't have to be the loudest or the most on trend to be the most relevant.
Yeah, and Airbnb is probably a really good example because the whole company is something that I don't think, even if the technology was there, it's like it's like not really the boomer ethos to like go and stay in some random person's house or even rent out your house. Like they don't really do that. And I think like the younger cohorts are just, digital natives, like, booking someone's house on an app. Oh, it's fine. They're a little more social, a little more trait openness and personality. So it's like, it's in their DNA to do things that I think resonate with people.
Yeah, it's a great point that you don't necessarily, maybe the product can be the marketing itself, right? You don't necessarily need to segment and let the market segment itself.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that on the show where, and I agree with this, where if marketing and product aren't working together pretty closely, unless you're like Coke and the product never changes and it's like you basically, just create ads as content and entertainment, okay, fine. But if you're building a market, it has to be way more than that. You have to be way more involved, especially something like an application. How do you re-engage people? How do you use technology to stay top of mind, to, get discounts, to share the app with friends and become viral? Like there's all these other questions that I think if product isn't working with marketing, they're just at a big disadvantage. You can do all the great marketing in the world, but if people don't have a good experience now,
Right.
they're not going to share it, and you're not going to get any sort of, pass on effect, which I think is very important. If you're going to spend a lot of money on ads, you want to make sure that the people who you bring in have a great experience and they bring in more people. So
Totally agree.
So Andrew, in terms of your company, how do you think of building your team? Have you done anything that you would share for other founders in terms of growing your staff, or anything you've learned along the way that you share with the other young founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always am of the belief that if you don't put anything out there, then no one will be able to find you. And so often, so many great things that we've had in terms of hiring and bringing on team members here have come from just putting something out there and letting people come in. And at this point, we get a ton of applicants when we put out new roles, 500, 600 every time. But so, like, for example, with offline, like, I found our co-founder with that via random. We put out some roles just for a separate thing, not for that, and someone emailed me saying, "Hey, I've been following what you're doing for a long time. Like, would love to chat." And here we are. And so I think so. Like, it's easy to look at the outcome of something and kind of just shoot straight for that, but like the process itself is obviously what gets you there. And so just like recognize the steps involved and recognize that sometimes you just have to take that step and put it yourself out there to see what might come back.
I love that you're at a point where just, you have enough of a following, you can put out a job and have 500 people inbound is really cool. And even high quality people, right? It's not just like random people. You actually have people who are following your company and can reference things you've done. I think that speaks to the quality of the company that you've built. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think on the other end of that, like, also it's hard for people to stand out. So anyone listening that's trying to figure out how to stand out, one application is definitely not enough, because when there's that many, it's pretty hard to differentiate one from another, unless you're getting like a more personalized touch point there.
Yeah, I think the hiring process is fairly stacked against the applicant at this point. Whether they're being filtered out through AI, or the role was already chosen internally or something, and it's a really tough process. I have a lot of empathy for people who are going through it. I think we're going to see a lot more entrepreneurs just because of how annoying companies have made hiring. Like I was actually going to start a company if I didn't join my current company now, because I didn't want to go through the applicant process. It was very annoying. And I'm like, it wouldn't be that hard to just, start my own thing. But
yeah, totally. I mean, I hear it and see it all the time, right? I mean, even not as formally companies, but even people that are just freelancing or consulting or being hired as a strategist, like the number of those that I've seen in the last 12 months has gone up significantly.
And what a blessing with all of these AI tools coming online. You can probably get a lot done a lot cheaper, and run the ship tighter. I think we're going to see smaller teams because of that. I think like there's no way around it.
Yeah, 100%.
So Andrew, along with that, what advice would you give for young people entering either the marketing or research field? Not just how to get a job, but sort of a mindset thing when they're entering the workforce, anything they can do from a personal brand perspective, however you want to take that question.
Good question. I mean, I do think the research world in particular is changing very rapidly. I think so much of research is being transformed by AI that I honestly think if you were to like go into school thinking that's what you would do, by the time you're out of school, like all of the jobs will have changed fundamentally for what they will have been, right? So I do think, like, it's not to say don't get into that space. I just think like understanding how it's changing is really important, and being able to come in with a really solid understanding of AI, but also knowing where and when to use it is important too, because I don't think and don't believe, and many people share this, that the full research process should be done with AI. I think there are pieces that can be helped by that, but I think it's really important to understand like where the human piece of that comes into. And that's, I think, just the broader thing, whether it's marketing or research or any other industries, like as technology does transform how we do our jobs on a day-to-day basis, the most important skills will be the ones that are the irreplaceable ones, which are the human ones, right? And being able to like have conversations. I mean, I've unfortunately had a lot of conversations where people are just terrible at like talking, and I'm like, okay, well, this is the job, so we have to, maybe we'll pass on this. But I think that's so undervalued, especially when there's such a focus on tech. It's like those soft skills and just abilities to like relate to one another are so important and so missing.
Yeah, and along those lines, I find there's this trope that Gen Z are antisocial and introverted, and I've not found that to be true. When I speak with my Gen Z friends, even if they're shy people at first, if you talk to them for a few minutes, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. Like they're well-read, they're like versed in philosophy and history. It's like they're very, very interesting people. The really studious ones, they give me hope for the future, honestly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's, again, when I think your first question, right? Like that's what you get for kind of lumping everyone in one bucket, right? Like there's so many different types of Gen Zers out there, and we've had the advantage of growing up with some of these technologies at our fingertips, and it's let us be so curious about things that are so amazing that we are now open to all of us. So I think it's just like knowing how to talk with one another as young people and with adults, and from adults to children, and all the in between, that is I think that like is positioned as this really crazy, like, again, all these stories that are like Gen Z versus boomers in the workplace, everyone hates each other, but like the reality is we're all the same. Like we're all just people, and we might just talk and operate differently and like look at the world a little bit differently, but we can still have conversations with one another.
Yeah, millennials, I think we got called lazy and entitled in the work. I remember those two in particular. And this was at the same time that, we would figure out how to automate a process that would take, one of our elder coworkers like several days or weeks. Like they would be like manually sending faxes, or they wouldn't know how to create a script for something that could do a task repeatedly. They would be doing it manually, things like that, right? Yeah. So I don't think like laziness there is a bad thing. You can find a way to do a stupid thing easier and then free up the team to do better work. So,
there are always two sides to that coin.
Yeah, there was the Bill Gates quote. I think this was Bill Gates. He said, I'll take a lazy employee any day over like an entitled employee, or I forget. It was something, I'll take a lazy employee because they'll figure out the most efficient way to do something. I don't know if it's a real quote, but there was a quote about that a while ago.
Yeah.
Andrew, so where can people go online to connect with you, and what types of companies would you like to call you that you think are best suited for your company's work?
Yeah, I mean, you can find us at DCDX.co or at offlinetalent.com, and then it's just Andrew in front of either of those to reach me personally. I mean, I think for DCDX, we prefer to work with companies that are pretty innovative and not against the status quo, but willing to challenge that. Like we will not come back to you with standard results, and I hope you're okay with that. So if you're looking for different ways to reach a young audience, and not just different, but like truly meaningful ways, then we're always happy to chat about that. And for offline, I would say anyone right now. We are in the early stages, and I'm like pretty open to having all types of conversations. So we've been supporting like really, really early stage brands all the way to that have just completed their Series A, all the way to legacy brands that are trying to figure out how to stay relevant. So, and as we're navigating that, I'm sure we'll have a better and stronger answer in the months to come. But for now, sky's open. Hit me up.
Awesome. Andrew, you've been a fascinating guest. We will put links to connect in the show description. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next week with another episode.